The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, and thank you for joining the webinar for APEX, Advanced Pipeline Estimating and Execution Planning Software Tool and Demo. Attendees will learn 5 things in this demo. Firstly, they'll learn how APEX can reduce or eliminate typical data integrity issues found through the creation of pipeline project estimates. The SQL Server database stores all data and forces data relations. Since it's not a file-based system, typical problems with multiple files are eliminated. It is a single source of data, and the estimates are in one location for multiple users. Secondly, you'll learn how APEX software integrated cost and scheduling functions can reduce the time spent creating estimates and their supporting conceptual schedules. The separation of cost and schedule is unnecessary. Estimates are calculated automatically when costs or schedules change, and any decrease or increase in productivity lengthens or shortens the schedule and costs accordingly. Thirdly, you'll learn why APEX is the only pipeline-specific estimating tool and is unlike any other commercially available estimating package. The application was developed specifically for linear project execution, and the software design evolved through input from experienced pipeline professionals. The estimating tool focus is pipeline construction, estimating, and execution planning, period. Fourthly, you'll learn how easy it is to export the estimate data to Excel instead of PDF, allowing for virtually unlimited data applications, imports, and customization. The data is moved in and out of the system using Excel. Templates and example cases are available to quickly create estimates, and the tabular and graphical output is available at all levels of the estimate. Lastly, you'll learn why APEX's robust and comprehensive functionality has been utilized on many major pipeline projects over the past decade. The software has been field tested on significant major projects, and you'll learn how to confidently compile multiple spreads and generate consistent output, and develop the model and understand the estimate using powerful analytical tools. The agenda for the webinar is to do a brief organizational overview, look at an overview of APEX and the utilization of APEX in the project lifecycle, look at key features, and then go to the product demonstration. The marketing and delivery of APEX to our pipeline clients is a joint venture between TriGem Technology and Petroglyph Project Analytics and Consulting, Inc. There are synergies between the offerings of Tylos Linear Planning Tool and APEX. APEX product developer and owner is TriGem Technology, who is located in Vancouver Island. Their corporate offerings include APEX extensions and system integrations. Petroglyph is located in Victoria, Calgary, Edmonton, Nevada, and Mexico, and they are the distributor for Tylos for the Americas and Power Project for Canada. The corporate offerings include project controls consulting services, planning software distribution, education training, implementation, and support. An overview of APEX, specialized and comprehensive tool for estimating and analyzing pipeline construction costs. The system ensures data integrity using database concurrency control, and it is a multi-user system, flexible, secure, robust, and auditable. Has a consistent and repeatable calculation model, and all estimate cost data resides in the SQL Server database. There are user-friendly interface with comprehensive and analytical abilities for what-if analysis, Monte Carlo simulation, and variance analysis, and you will see that the analytical and reporting capabilities are very powerful. This diagram is one that you may be familiar with. It shows the various classes of estimate and schedule through the project life cycle. This is as per the AACE estimate classification guide. Initially, when you're doing a benchmark estimate, when you only have metrics, maybe historical data, and you're producing a class 5 schedule, that's where APEX could use historical information or experience or metrics that are within the company to develop that screening estimate. As you move through the engineering development and you have more confidence in the engineering detail, you develop greater classes of schedule certainty, and you get to the point where you have the class 2 check estimate or the execution estimate as you go through the execution part. This is showing the various phases of a project, initially where you have the project concept and opportunity assessment, where you are looking at the screening estimate and high-level conceptual plans and any risks and opportunities associated with that. Phase 2 is where you're looking at alternatives and and selecting the preferred alternative. So you go through the alternatives identification, evaluation, what if scenarios, and again, risk and opportunity identification. So the alternative is selected and you move on to phase 3, which is where you develop the scope and detailed execution plans. You have the estimate refined and the economic analyses conducted. Phase 4 is the execution stage, where the plans are implemented and change management is managed against those execution plans. And again, you're managing actively the risk and opportunities. Phase 5 is the operation level for the project, where you are monitoring the performance and looking at benchmarking and lessons learned. This identifies the areas where APEX can be utilized through the 5 phases of the project. Some key features in APEX are the detailed cost model is built from first principles, which means that it is using from the ground up specifying the resources necessary. It's not a black box approach, so you specify the labor, material, equipment, subcontracts, working from the ground up. It supports construction execution planning and answering the what if questions and allowing you to understand the cost and schedule risks on a spread. The system architecture allows you to custom integrate with other systems, whether they be project controls tools or financial controls tools. And the comprehensive system data auditing allows for full trackability and monitoring. You can use multiple currencies in SI units or imperial units. It supports multiple resource databases. All items assigned are a work breakdown structure code, a code of accounts, cost element, and currency, and it can be any of the project costs. Unit price items are easily imported from Excel, and each item can be specified as a daily cost. Labor or equipment counts can be used in the resource loading, and dependent costs can be set up and calculated based on an input percentage. Cost and resources can be integrated by time or location, and escalation can be optionally included or not in the present value and cash flow analyses. And it provides for capturing any other costs that are not specifically assignable to an operation. The powerful data analytic features to assess work production, move-arounds, work stoppages, camp locations, and travel. Cost schedule variance analysis and earned value analysis are powerful features of the tool. Monte Carlo simulation to identify risks and uncertainties in the operations and maintain a risk register for the spreads. Those will be shown in the demo following. This diagram shows the system architecture for APEX. And starting with the database and going to the project, the estimate, the spread, and the operation. And you will see that there is a strong pattern through the software development, making it intuitive for moving around and navigating through the software itself. We'll now head into the project demonstration.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, we're now going to look at a demonstration of the APEX software itself. This is what it looks like when you open up APEX. I'm going to talk about the ribbon across the top first. In the Home tab, this is where you would establish your system decks, whether they be for labor, material, or equipment. We'll look at labor rates for 2017, for example. And again, those can be imported from the information that you already probably have. So this has the properties for this deck, any labor types that would be used, the deck items or resources themselves, currencies that can be applied, including the exchange rate factors, the rate basis for how those hours and costs are going to be calculated, and mobilization units. In the material deck, you have the material types, the deck items, currency, and weight units. And finally, the equipment resource deck, where you have your equipment types, your deck items, which is a deeper dive of the equipment types, currency to be used, the rate basis, the fuel types, whether they be gasoline or diesel, the fuel units, and the weight units. And again, these can be either imported or built within the system. The System Tools tab just contains standard project tools. In this case, it contains user permission controls, which apply to the enterprise version. The Settings tab is just high-level options regarding the system, display, and solver calculations. And the View tab allows you to toggle between system session windows and set your color options, as well as save and restore your project desktops. In this case, we have one database. It's called Apex Database. I'm going to open the dialog box for that. This provides information on the system, the add-on modules, database, and the server that's currently active. The database is shown in the library view, but also in the bottom right-hand corner on the screen in case you are working with multiple databases or to validate that you're in the correct database. I'm now going to open a sample project, in this case the Imperial Sample Project. Okay, we're going to open the dialog box for the sample project, and you can see that it provides information regarding the description, location, scope of work, start and end dates, project manager, and estimating manager. So this is at the project level. Also, it shows the WBS or work breakdown structure information that's going to be used, including the codes, the coding structure, and the coding hierarchy. Code of accounts information, this can be imported from your company code of accounts, so you have the codes, coding structure, and coding hierarchy. The cost elements that we'll be looking at are labor, material, equipment, subcontract, other, and distributed costs. And the type of information is there's operations types, subcontract cost types, other cost types, and any notes that you might want to be included as part of this Imperial Sample Project estimate. In the Economics tab, it's showing the currencies that are being used on this project and allows you to calculate or to set the options for calculating your internal rate of return and your net present value calculations and escalation. At the Estimates tab, this is the summary level for the project that shows that we only have one estimate. It's the unclassified estimate, and this is the split of hours and cost based on the various cost types for this unclassified estimate. And any notes or files that you may want to save with the project. If you click on the colored rectangle, it allows you to export the project database to Excel. So there are strong software design patterns throughout the hierarchy in Apex, making the navigation of the software very intuitive and easy to move through the menus. And you can right-click anywhere to set the options for colors, whether you want legends included, how you want things to be displayed, whether time is on the x-axis or locations is on the x-axis, how you want your chart colors to look. So there are a lot of different options that you can set so that it's displaying exactly how you want it. Okay, we're going to look at the unclassified estimate now. And in this unclassified estimate, there are two spreads you can see in the library view on the left and in the graphical view on the right. You can right-click in this screen and you can set whether you want large icons, small icons, any of the details. You can look at, for example, I need to do a solve. You can look at cost summary information. You can look at operation type distribution. That's at a very high level for that unclassified estimate. I will get into some of that later, but right now we're looking at, we've got within the spread, we have the various operations. Within the unclassified estimate, we have two spreads. Okay, you'll also notice that once we imported a project, there were more tabs that appeared across the ribbon. I'm going to go through some of those now. In the Estimate Tools, this is where it allows you to import your spread or your operations information, or analyze your equipment or labor usage and update your benchmarks. So if we look at the equipment usage, for example, for spread 1, it's going to show us the summary of information, and it's highlighting any overages or over quantities or over hours that have been put in this estimate. So this allows you a quick view of how your equipment has been allocated and to validate it. So as part of this estimate tools, you can also go through and validate any information regarding your right-of-way access points, your operation access, right-of-way constraints. You can look at your production inputs. You can go through and validate those. You can look at your coding. You can review your estimate coding and your spread coding, as well as identify any missing estimate units or spread units. You can compare estimates, spreads, or operations. In this case, I'm going to compare spreads. So I'm going to compare spread 1 against spread 2, and the output is the typical waterfall chart with these backup details. Now this is very helpful for reporting purposes. This waterfall chart is commonly used. All you have to do is right-click and you can output the chart or save to the image file. There's also a Haul and string load calculator that can be used. So you can do your input values and it will give you calculated results for your haul and string operation. There's a material quantity calculator. So in this case, we're looking at dirt piles, and whether it's conical or pyramid shape, all you have to do is go in and put your parameters in and it will calculate it for you. Cut and fill, you just enter the cut length and fill length and it will do the calculations for you. And similarly with ditch and backfill, so whether it's trench or backhoe, you put in the values and it will calculate it for you. Okay, the What If Analysis tab. This is an add-on module that allows the user to look at various what-if scenarios and do some sensitivity analysis based on production, resources, fuel, work stoppages, etc. Financial analysis is also an add-on module that provides the ability to analyze various cash flow scenarios. So you can look at, for example, spread variance analysis for progressing. You can calculate CPI, SPI, percent work complete, etc. You can look at net present value calculations to analyze multiple estimates that start at different times, and you can do variance analysis between your estimates, spreads, and operations. The probabilistic analysis tab is used for conducting Monte Carlo simulations and risk assessment output. That's the topic for a future webinar, but I'll get into it a little bit more in the spread itself. Integration is an add-on module that provides the interfaces to the software shown on the tab. For the reports, now there's a lot of information that you can get out of this system, obviously, but we'll look at the reports that you can get out of the estimate. So you can get the build-up sheets, you can get the summaries. I'm going to show you an example of an operation build-up sheet. And I'm sure you're all familiar with these. This is for haul and string, so this is the output for our haul and string. Okay. So you can also look at schedule summaries and resource loading in your reporting. This just shows you that there is a range of reports and exports that can be done within the tool itself. Okay, I'm now going to open the dialog box for the unclassified estimate and we'll walk through it. You can see similar patterns between the various menus. So when we're looking at the unclassified estimate dialog box, this is saying for this estimate, here's the lead estimator, here's the data records contained, here's the parameters, so the labor, material, equipment decks that were used, the currency, and the production consolidation units that were applied as part of this estimate. The fuel parameters, so CO2 emissions, costs, the units that are being used, any calendars, so these can easily be imported from the ones you already use, including holidays, and the costs, so looking at whether escalation and markup are to be included in your calculations. And similarly with escalation, this is just information that we imported for the various cost element types regarding escalation. In the right-of-way, it shows base locations for the various camps. So spread 1 is using the main camp, spread 2 is using the spread 2 camp, and there's access points along the way. We had just imported the access points from an Excel sheet that we had for this project. There's information regarding the mainline pump, or pipe, and stockpile locations. On the spreads themselves, it's showing that at the summary level, we have spread 1 and spread 2 in this estimate, and here's how the hours and the dollars are split across those two spreads. In the other tab, we have the unit price items, which in this case is the line pipe, or any dependent costs if there were any. Okay, in the results tab, this is where there's lots of information. So this is showing us in tabular form on the left and in graphical form on the right, the split for the unclassified estimate across the various cost types. And again, you can output the chart so that you can use it in your reporting or however you want to use it. Okay. So we have the labor information that we've put in there. And if we right click, we can show the cost type distribution. This is where I had shown it earlier, but this is showing for labor for the unclassified estimate. This is the split between those different cost types. And material, equipment. Again, you can see the equipment cost split out by cost type, subcontract, other, escalation, and markup. In the charts tab, you can see the schedule in a number of different ways. This is just at a very high level showing spread 1 and spread 2 in Gantt chart form and in March chart form as well, showing that spread 1 starts in May and goes to November, and spread 2 starts in, or I guess it goes to December, it starts in November and goes to June. So in the linear cost, this is showing at the unclassified estimate level where the linear cost sits. You can also display the costs only for labor, if you decide. Material. So you can see it's showing the material costs. We can also say, okay, we want to see the costs for specific information. So say we're going between right-of-way point 240 to 280. And it will show you the costs in both tabular and graphical form for that input location 240 to 280. Okay, and with cash flow, this is showing the unclassified estimate monthly cash flow. Again, you can display labor only. So you can see it just says labor. You can display subcontract. And again, you can show integrated costs. And in this case, we're going to say, okay, we have to do a report for third quarter. We're going to show July 1st to end of September. And it will give you the output for that, including the data behind it, so that you have that information. For the labor loading, again, you can display, okay, I want to see the indirect and direct split. Maybe you want to see all operations types so that you can see the various types. You could also say, okay, I want to display, no, I want to display the, come on, it's working on it, display the loading surface. So this shows time across the bottom and the right of way across the side here. So you have the time data and the location data, and you have the ability to go through and animate this for this labor loading surface. You can also integrate the resources, and we're going to do it for the same time period for third quarter. So it gives you all of the information. You can choose to have the legend on or off, if that depends on you. But it gives you the ability to go in and look at that. Similarly with equipment, you can display the direct-indirect split. So it's showing you direct and indirect. You can display all operations types. So it's showing you each of the operations. And again, you can, oops, there we go. My apologies. Yeah, you could display the loading surface, or you could integrate the resources, or you can export the loading surface. Okay, you can also look at fuel consumption. So you can display whether you want period gasoline, period diesel, or whether you just want the cumulative total. Okay, so now we're going to look at the metrics tab, and this is showing that there are flexible metrics calculations that you can specify any number of metrics you'd like to see. A simple metric is one filter. A compound filtering allows for both the numerator and denominator to be selected or specified. In the stochastic tab, this is where the Monte Carlo simulation options are defined for the estimate. All of the parameters can be defined at the spread level, and more will be shown when we look at the spread. We'll look at all of that later. And then the notes tab. So any notes specific to the estimate can be determined here. So these build-up sheets for the operations, these were the sheets that we used when we built up the operations, just to import the information so that you can see where the information comes from to populate the database. If you click on one of the colored rectangles at the unclassified estimate level, it just gives you a very simple March chart showing you where the spread 1 is, spread 2, main camp, and spread 2 camp is located. Now we're going to look at the spread level itself. Again, all the operations are listed in the library on the left or shown graphically on the right. When we open the dialog box at the spread level, we'll look at each of those. Again, you can see the consistent patterns through the buildup of the tool. So at the spread level, you can talk about the estimator that prepared it, the data records, the parameters again, so the DEX that were used, the currency, and the production consolidation units. In the operations, the work days per week, the loop move days, and weather days. Labor information, so the work hours per day, the move around hours, travel hours, lunch and coffee hours. Equipment, the work hours per day and the idling hours per day. And this just gives you information regarding idling time, fuel, again, your fuel parameters, CO2 emissions, cost, holidays, production profile, any work stoppages if there were some, any options that you may have in there, and costs with respect to, say, markup percentage and things. On the right-of-way, this is showing the elevation profile for the right-of-way and the access points, similarly to that table that I showed you that we brought in. The travel profile, turnarounds, crossings, constraints. In this case, we had wildlife migrations and biodiversity zones, and then mainline pipe information. I'm going to get to these other tabs in a minute, but if you click on these rectangular colored boxes, at the spread level, it's going to show you the access points, turnarounds, crossings, constraints, and elevation profile for the spread. So this could be output for reporting as well. At the site, we're looking at base locations. So similarly, when we looked at the estimate level, spread 1 is using the main camp and these right-of-way access points. It's using these stockpile sites. And then we're looking at calculations for pipe hauling. In the operations tab, these are all the operations that are part of spread 1. Now you can import them, you can output the data, you can look at the direct-indirect ratio. You have the ability to use this information a number of different ways. So if you look at the cost type distribution, you can see all the operations and how the costs are distributed across those operations and the backup data associated with it. And similarly, you can look at the direct. So if you wanted to look at just direct costs only, that's what I'll show you. Indirect, distributed costs, subcontract costs, and duplicate costs. Now, duplicate operations are where the duplicate flag is set so that the resource is not counted twice. An example may be of a person that mobilizes early to supervise operations at the beginning, but then is doing additional work on the spread. So this is just information on the unit price items, so the HDD crossings and any dependent costs if there were some. On the results tab, again, we have the tabular form. This is for spread 1, remember, and the graphical pie chart form. Labor, again, you could look at the cost type distribution and the data behind it. We're going to just look at, for example, the superintendent. So I'm going to double click on the superintendent. So you can see that duplicate operations, which we referred to earlier, are highlighted in blue. So if you just looked at the schedule for the superintendent, it wouldn't be obvious which operations are duplicates, but when you select the box to highlight it, you can see that the startup support services and the completion support services are duplicate operations, so you wouldn't want that superintendent to be counted twice. And again, you can show it in the labor loading, so you have the ability to toggle that on or off. So I'm going to go back to the labor thing first. There's work hours and total hours. Now, the work hours are the number of hours that are worked, obviously, while the total hours are the equivalent paid hours, including overtime. And this is used for the metrics calculations because some of the calculations are based on work hours and some are on total hours. So it just depends on how you're calculating your metrics. So material and equipment. Similarly, when you can do your outputs, subcontract, other, escalation, your markup. And then this is some information regarding your progress and variance analysis. In the charts, I'm going to just expand this for a second. In the charts for the spread, this is the Gantt chart showing the various activities in Gantt chart form for that spread. Then there's the March chart form. Linear cost. Again, this is at the unclassified estimate for spread 1. You can do the same thing where you can show anything you want. In this case, it's just labor. Maybe you want to look at subcontract costs. You can integrate the costs and we'll show, again, we'll look at 240 to 280, for example. And that'll show you all the information for spread 1, the costs associated, and then input location from 240 to 280. You can look at cash flow, again, displaying it however you want. The labor loading. So if we want to just display for the third quarter, because we have to do a report for the third quarter for this, you can look at that. And it will show you the labor loading, including the peak quantities and things for each of the operations. So you can take it to various levels, however you want to look at it. And again, you could display the loading surface if you wanted to. The equipment loading. And fuel consumption. So the metrics are similar to the previous one that we looked at with the simple and compound metrics calculations. In the stochastic tab, so this is where we're doing the Monte Carlo simulation options. And how many iterations you want, and if you want to look at each iteration result. The parameters around the Monte Carlo risk options, any shutdowns that you want to consider, and then the risk register. So we have a few risks that we've put into this one. So I'm going to double click on HDD failures, for example, and here's the discrete event for HDD failures. Is there any correlation? Some notes, the risk matrix behind it. Looking at event impacts, you can set your min, most likely, and maximum, and your distributions. And it provides a sense of the distribution based on the input probability and ranges before doing a full-blown risk simulation. So we're going to simulate the risk register. Okay, and then we're going to look at the results. So you have the ability to show for the spread one, do you want to show the cost results or the schedule results? And again, it's giving you the iterations, the min-max range. You can look at the scatter diagram, which lots of people like to use, and summary information, giving you your P70 probabilistic results and your contingency information. And then you can look at any notes. Okay, I'm going to look at a specific operation now. I'm going to pick Holland string. So we're going to look at the dialog box for Holland string, and this is giving us some information regarding that operation. So the number of work days and the basis of its miles per day in this case. So the parameters are the hours per day, similar to the previous level where we're looking at weather hours, move around hours, whether you want rental charges and maintenance fuel charges and everything calculated as part of your estimate or not. You can also do the output build-up sheet that we looked at, and I think I showed you that earlier, but I'll just show it to you again. This is what the Holland string output build-up sheet would look like. Okay, so then you can look at other equipment calculation settings. You can look at your linear scope, do you want to do it from start to end or end to start for your calculations. This is what I mean, executing work in the downstream direction, executing work in the upstream direction, the schedule information, any work breaks you may have. Okay, in the options tab, so you have travel information. So you've got the travel distance for your round trip. You've got your work-based location travel. Now you can go in and you can look at your travel for Holland string. This is your travel profile for Holland string. Now you can have it time-based or location-based, whichever works for you. You have your base location information, your cost work breakdown structure information, any exclusions you may have, distributions, duplicate operations, benchmarking, display for your charting, and any risk information. Now we're going to look at labor. In the labor tab, this shows the labor resources assigned to the operation. Now, if I select this little icon up here, it will show these are the labor resources for this operation and these are the equipment resources. It allows you to do a validation between the two to make sure that you have sufficient operators for the equipment or vice versa. Materials for this Holland string, equipment, and again, we saw how you can go through and validate that. Subcontract information. Any other costs? So we have small tools and we have a boom for stringing side booms. And in the results tab, again, we have the tabular and graphical pie chart for Holland string only. And you can output the build-up sheet, you can output the chart. Got information on the production. This is very simple chart, Holland string in a March chart form. And again, you could do the costs however you want to display them, the cash flow, and the daily progress. We're going to take a look at this one because this one is interesting. So this is showing the days where you've had work days. So I'm just going to click on Wednesday, for example, and it's going to give me the information for the output daily production for that, and the information on the access point name, the right-of-way access, and the distance to the right-of-way access. So you can view the histograms here. So we can look at the production rate for the miles per day. We can look at production rate profile over time. Again, we could look at the travel profile for Holland string. This is a location-based production rate profile. So there's a lot of information that you can get out of the histogram information for the daily progressing. And then this is showing you your actual production information. The metrics are similar to what we showed earlier, and the notes to what we showed earlier. So you can see that there is a consistent way that the hierarchy of the tool has been built up so that you can navigate around very easily. So this concludes the demo portion. Hopefully I've shown the power and comprehensive functionality of the tool, and I really would appreciate if we could get any questions or feedback sent to me. That would be great so that we can make sure the webinar includes everything for next time. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you enjoyed the Apex webinar.